Welcome back, fifth grade. So, as promised, our second video is truly dedicated to us deep diving and finding the details to help support our claim in our performance task. We are going to quickly go over our answers to our dirt quiz from yesterday. Question 1. How many ships were in Octavian's fleet? The correct answer is A. Question 2. Why didn't Octavian want to burn down Mark Antony's fleet? The correct answer again is A. Question 3. Where was the first safe port Cleopatra and Mark Antony could go? The correct answer is C. And question 4. What did Cleopatra and Mark Antony rename their club? The correct answer is A. Scholars, the correct answers are 1A, 2A, 3C, 4A. We're moving. So now, scholars, as I promised, we are deep diving into our performance tasks. So this is a great time for you to go back and look at your notes on yesterday. On yesterday, we talked about how we were going to attack our prompt. We said the first thing we needed to do was explain how Mark Antony's response changed. After we explained how it changed, we needed to go in and identify at least two details from the text to support our response. So, scholars, we have, or you guys did pretty well with identifying and explaining how Mark Antony's response changed. Now, we saw the most challenge when it was time to identify two details to support our response. So today's lesson will be focused on finding two details to support our response that explains how Mark Antony's response to defeat changes over the course of chapter 14. So scholars, we are going to make this chart. When you make this chart, you can just write on your sheet of paper your claim. And in today's lesson, we are actually going to identify 4 different details. From the 4 details, you should be able to pick or select which 2 details you would like to use in your ACE response. So I wrote the following as my claim. So on my sheet of paper, I'm going to write claim. And scholars, you do not have to rethink of a claim. If you want to use your claim from yesterday, still write your claim from yesterday. My claim was Mark Antony's response to being defeated by Octavian at Optimum changed over the course of chapter 14 from feeling hopeless and discouraged to ready to fight back. So, scholars, I have identified how Mark Antony's response has changed. It started at hopeless and discouraged, and it changes to ready to fight back. So in my ACE response, I need to have a detail that shows he was hopeless and discouraged. And I need to have a detail to show that Mark Antony was ready to fight back. Scholars, I'm going to give you 1 minute to rewrite your claim or revise your claim. Again, you will have 1 minute. You're rewriting your claim on your sheet of paper or revising your claim on your sheet of paper. 1 minute, let's go. All right, scholars. So we now have our claim. As promised, today is truly focused on finding our details. Go ahead and grab your book. Let's go to page 98. I'm sorry, page 103. Let's go to page 103. Cleopatra prepares for action. Now that we're on page 103, scholars, we are looking for a response of Mark Antony's that shows he has been defeated. So we're looking for Mark Antony's response to being defeated. We are going to start under Cleopatra prepares for action. We're at the second paragraph. All right. Mark Antony stopped off in Carnatia to begin planning a land battle in Asia Minor. However, news of Oxidum had traveled quickly across the sea, prompting Mark Antony's commanders to pledge their loyalty to Octavian. The commander of Carnatia not only refused to see Mark Antony, but also executed the soldiers sent to arrange the meeting, as well as any of his own men who objected his tactics. Mark Antony would have taken his life if his friends had not intervened. He sailed from Alexandria without help and without hope. Discouraged and depressed, he took refuge in a little shack on the island of Pharos. So, scholars, we now see a response of Mark Antony. Under detail A on your paper, I want you to write what that response looks like. Again, under detail A, you're writing what their response looked like. Now, go ahead and write your page numbers. This is coming from page 103 through 104. I want you to take 1 minute. You are in your own words paraphrasing what happened in the section I just read as it relates to Mark Antony's response. You have 1 minute. Let's go. "35 seconds. "5 seconds. So, scholars, I wrote down is that Mark Antony was without hope. He felt discouraged and depressed. And that is my detail A. We are now going to look for detail B. Detail B is going to be on page 104. So go ahead and write page 104. We are under making final arrangements. So as we discuss, or as I read aloud, making final arrangements, I'm going to read the very first paragraph. I want you to start thinking, how does this explain or represent how Mark Antony responds to being defeated? The reunion at the place between Cleopatra and Mark Antony must have been bittersweet when he finally returned to her. There was nothing for them to do but wait for Octavian's next move. They fell back into their old habits. They renamed their club We Who Will Die Together and went back to hosting magnificent banquets every night, vowing to enjoy themselves to the end. Scholars, you are now going to write, what does this show? What we've just read, this section of the text, how does that show how Mark Anthony responds to being defeated? Now I'm going to do something different. As you write, I'm going to write on our presentation so that we have a representation of what we have learned so far. Scholars, I am actually going to give you 2 minutes. That will give us enough time to put on our paper our thoughts. Be sure that you go ahead and tell where you got this from. On my paper, I'm saying I got it on page 104. Be sure that you identify where you found this information. Again, you are writing, how did Mark Anthony respond to defeat based on the section that we have just read. Your 2 minutes has started. All right, scholars, I now want you to go in and find one piece of evidence that you're going to use to help you explain his feelings or his response. Take 1 minute to do so. Okay, scholars. So for detail B, we see that Mark Anthony goes back to his old habits. He goes back to hosting these lavish banquets. He reestablishes a club, he renames it, and they named it We Who Will Die Together. I wrote that he has accepted defeat and vows to enjoy himself to the very end. This is found on page 104. So far, scholars, we have two details. One, we see Mark Antony without hope, feeling hopeless. He has no help. He's discouraged and depressed. We see that they say that Mark Antony would have taken his own life. Now we see a change in his behavior. He is back to hosting these banquets. He has vowed to have fun and enjoy himself until the end. So these are two ways so far that Mark Antony's response to defeat has changed. Let's look at detail C. Let's go to page 105. We're at the second full paragraph. It is likely. I'm going to read this paragraph aloud. It is likely that both Cleopatra and Mark Antony tried to strike a deal with Octavian. In one report, Cleopatra asked that her children be provided for, suggesting that they inherit her kingdom. Mark Antony asked to be allowed to stay in Egypt or move to Athens. Octavian ignored their requests but kept communication lines open. He needed to get control of Cleopatra's wealth to pay his troops in Rome, who were threatening to revolt. He needed to capture Egypt. So, scholars, we have just read this section. I want us now to think. We see that Mark Antony is trying to strike a deal. What does that, or how does it explain Mark Antony's response to being defeated? I want us to take 1 minute. Under detail C, you are going to write, how does this section of the text help support your claim on Mark Antony's response to being defeated? You have 1 minute. Let's go. Almost forgot, your 1 minute has started. All right, scholars. So, under detail C, I wrote that Mark Antony attempts to strike a deal. This shows that he has some hope because he is thinking of the future. In detail B, we saw that he had accepted defeat and that he had just vowed to enjoy himself to the end, meaning he thought maybe the end was pretty close. But then in detail C, we see him try to strike a deal to kind of save his life. That shows us that there is some hope still left. And I got this, we got this detail from page 105. So, scholars, right now you should have 3 details. We are now going to go over to page 106. Let's look under Mark Antony Fights Back. I am going to read aloud the very first paragraph. Again, you're thinking, how does this show how Mark Antony responds to being defeated? While Cleopatra prepared to go into hiding, Mark Antony pulled himself together to fight. When Octavian's troops moved to the outskirts of Alexandria, Mark Antony launched an assault that temporarily forced the Romans to retreat. The battle earned him a small victory, and Mark Antony returned to Alexandria and to Cleopatra in triumph. So, we see a change in Mark Antony. I want you to take this time under detail D and write, what is that change? How does it represent Mark Anthony's response to being defeated? I am going to give you 1 minute. We are writing. How does that detail show Mark Anthony's response to defeat? Again, that came from page 106. Your 1 minute has started. Remember, you are paraphrasing your evidence and your details. All right, scholars. So for detail D, Mark Anthony, guys, decides, I am not taking this. I am going to fight back. So we see Mark Anthony fight back. He launches an assault on the Romans, causing them to retreat. We found this on page 106. So, scholars, on your paper, you should have your claim written out. You should have 4 details. Detail A shows a hopeless Mark Anthony, a depressed and discouraged Mark Anthony. Detail B shows a Mark Anthony that has accepted his defeat and feels that maybe life for him is about to end. He starts hosting banquets and parties. In detail C, we see a Mark Anthony that tries to strike a deal. We see him have a little hope that he may have future or a little life left ahead. And then in detail D, we see a warrior Mark Anthony. Mark Anthony has decided to fight back. Now we see that he does have a small victory, and that victory causes the Romans to retreat. So, scholars, again, you should have a claim and 4 details on your notes. We're moving. Scholars, let's remember it's an ace paragraph. So, yes, you have a total of 4 details. How many do you need to use? Yes, you only need 2. So, scholars, you can select 2 of the details that we have written out in today's lesson. But in your response to your performance task, you must include a claim, context, 2 pieces of evidence. That's detail 1 and a second detail, and an analysis. Now remember, in your analysis, you're going to use a hired word and make an inference, because, or by statement. Scholars, that is the end of our lesson today. It is now time for you to take your notes and complete your performance task.